My younger brother hijacked my own wedding to propose to his girlfriend, right in the middle of my wife's father-daughter dance, in front of every single guest we had. So a few weeks later, I hired a woman to show up and pretend to be his pregnant mistress, in front of his entire family. And when it was finally over, even my own sister told me I might have gone too far. I'm 35. My brother is 29, I'll call him Todd, and our sister is 32, I'll call her Abby. Todd had a complicated birth, spent his first month of life in the ICU, and ever since then our parents doted on him constantly, sometimes at Abby's expense, sometimes at mine, though none of us really talked about it out loud growing up, it was just the water we swam in. Somewhere along the way, Todd learned he could get away with almost anything, and he developed this pattern of making himself the center of attention at other people's biggest moments. Not always maliciously, I want to be fair about that, but often enough that by the time we were adults, the pattern was impossible to ignore. The clearest example, long before any of this started, was at the baby shower our mom threw for Abby. Todd's girlfriend, I'll call her Lucy, stood up in the middle of it and announced her own pregnancy, right there, at a party that was supposed to be entirely about my sister and her baby. Abby was furious. Our parents brushed it off as Todd just being excited and not thinking it through, and life went on the way it always did in our family, which is to say, nothing really changed. So when I proposed to my now wife, I'll call her Michelle, I actually wanted to elope. Just the two of us, somewhere quiet, no guest list, no seating chart, none of it. Michelle wanted her family there though, and I understood why, so I agreed to a real wedding, and I invited my own family mostly out of obligation, already half bracing myself for something to go sideways. At the reception, my best man, I'll call him Jim, noticed a small jewelry store receipt fall out of Todd's jacket pocket while they were both getting drinks at the bar. Jim confronted him about it right there, they had words, and Jim came and found me the second he got the chance to tell me everything. I put it together immediately. Todd was planning to propose to Lucy, at my wedding, on my day, the same way he'd inserted himself into Abby's. I told him flatly, right then, that he was no longer going to be a groomsman. Todd went crying to our parents almost immediately, and it turned into a full-blown family argument that spilled into the week before my own wedding. Because Todd had never technically admitted out loud that he was planning to propose, my parents decided that I was the one being unfair, jumping to conclusions about my own brother based on a receipt. I brought up the baby shower, and 2 or 3 other times he'd pulled something similar over the years, small things at other people's graduations and birthdays that I'd never bothered to make a big deal out of before. My parents honestly couldn't argue with the pattern once I laid it all out in a row like that, so they got Todd to agree, in front of them, that he wouldn't try anything as a guest. That wasn't enough for me to reinstate him as a groomsman, but I let the rest of it go, because I didn't want to spend my last week of wedding planning in a war with my own family. I did warn Todd privately, one-on-one, that if he tried anything at all during my wedding, he would regret it. He said he understood completely. Fast forward to the actual day. Everything was going beautifully. Michelle looked incredible, the weather held, even my nervous father of the bride toast went off without a hitch. Then came the father-daughter dance, the one moment in the entire day that belonged completely and only to Michelle and her dad. About a minute into it, Todd walked straight across the dance floor toward Lucy, got down on one knee, and proposed. Loudly. Dramatically. Angled so that every single guest in the room had a clear line of sight to watch it happen in real time. He didn't just propose during my wedding, he specifically chose the exact minute that was supposed to belong to somebody else entirely, and made sure the whole room turned to watch him do it. I watched my wife's face change as an entire room full of eyes drifted away from her and her father mid-song to look at my brother instead. That was the moment something in me went very quiet and very calm, which, if you know me, is a far more dangerous version of me than actually getting loud. Jim and I started planning within days, though we deliberately waited a few weeks so it wouldn't look connected to the wedding at all, so Todd wouldn't see it coming from any obvious direction. We found a woman willing to approach Todd and Lucy in public, in front of a group of his friends, and calmly claimed she was pregnant with his baby. Todd denied it immediately, loudly, the way you'd expect. But I'd already passed her his actual phone number ahead of time, and I'd quietly rigged a few details on his phone beforehand so that when she called him in front of everyone, the timing and the specifics lined up just enough to look completely damning. Lucy didn't wait around to hear his side of it. She pulled the ring off her finger right there and threw it at him, and walked out in tears in front of the entire group. The second Todd saw me afterward, and saw the exact look on my face, he knew immediately who was behind it, no explanation needed. I didn't answer a single call or text from him, or from either of my parents, for the rest of my honeymoon. Here's where it gets more complicated though, and it's the part my sister genuinely couldn't get past when I told her everything. Todd and Lucy already had a young child together, from before any of this happened. After the staged scandal, Lucy left him for good, and she's been limiting how much access he gets to their kid ever since, which honestly was never something I sat down and planned for or wanted. It was just the real, messy fallout of Todd finally facing consequences for a habit he'd never once been made to answer for. Todd eventually tracked me down, furious, demanding I clear his name, tell Lucy the truth, undo what I'd set in motion. I told him I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about, and in that same message, I attached an itemized bill for half the cost of my own wedding, since he was the one who'd derailed the most important dance of the entire night. Michelle knew about the plan from the very beginning, for what it's worth. She's the one who gave the final go-ahead, because it was her father-daughter dance he hijacked, not just some abstract principle of mine. Between the two of us, we felt completely justified in the moment. Abby, though, still thinks I crossed a real line, mostly because of the child caught in the middle of it all, and if I'm being fully honest with you, some days I understand exactly what she means, even if I don't fully agree. When this story first made the rounds looking for outside reactions, the response leaned heavily in my favor. A lot of people kept coming back to the same point, that Todd had a long, well-documented pattern of inserting himself into other people's biggest days, and that proposing in the middle of someone else's father-daughter dance wasn't some spontaneous romantic impulse, it was just the most extreme version of something he'd already done before, at a baby shower, at birthdays, at other people's graduations. A good portion of the reaction also focused on my parents specifically, on how genuinely frustrating it is to grow up watching one sibling get quietly excused over and over simply because he never technically admitted to anything out loud, while everyone else in the family was just expected to absorb it and move on. But there was a real, honest split too, and it tracked almost exactly with what my sister had already said to my face, that staging an entire fake pregnancy scandal is a massive, deliberate thing to set into motion against another adult, and it's much harder to call it fully justified once you know. A real child ended up caught in the fallout of it, through absolutely no fault of their own. A smaller number of replies pushed back even further, arguing that two wrongs don't erase each other, and that as satisfying as watching Todd get exactly what he'd been building toward for years might feel, it doesn't automatically make every method of getting there the right one. That tension, more than the revenge itself, was what people kept circling back to, because it genuinely isn't simple once you sit with it. Honestly, if you'd asked me the night of my own wedding, I would have told you there was no version of payback that could possibly feel like too much. Watching my brother calmly steal that exact moment from my wife broke something in me I hadn't expected to break. But hearing my sister lay out the real, ongoing cost of it afterward, the part involving a kid who never chose any of this and still has to live with the aftermath, is the part one still sit with some nights. So I'll leave it with you the way it's been left with me ever since. Did I take it too far, or did my brother finally get exactly what years of this pattern were building toward? Drop your verdict below.